They say New York has a way of stripping you down to your most honest, desperate self. I used to scoff at that. But now, as I look back at those months, I see the city with new eyes. Hard, glittering, packed with secrets that glint between its towers and subway shadows. Maybe I should start where I started to unravel, with the faintest trace of perfume on Jake's shirt collar. I'd washed his shirts 100 times before without noticing anything. But that night in November, as I emptied the hamper in our Brooklyn apartment, there it was, a scent as bright and sharp as a warning. Not mine, not detergent. Something like orange blossom and faintly sweet, clinging stubbornly to the fabric. I'm not, or so I always told myself, the kind of wife who snoops or doubts without cause. Jake and I had built a life over 10 solid years. He was steady, successful in his finance job downtown. I'd switched my marketing career to part-time after our son Tyler was born. We had a circle of parents from the playground. We threw dinner parties. We went to the Metropolitan Museum on Sundays. Our life, to everyone else, looked enviable. Maybe, for a while, it was. But that scent set something off in me. At first, I dismissed it. Maybe he'd hugged a female colleague. Maybe it was a one-off encounter in a crowded elevator. But then I noticed other things. His phone, which now never left his sight. The flurry of late-night emails. The way he'd laugh a little too loudly if I entered the room. Once, when he thought I was asleep, I heard him whispering on a call, his voice low and urgent. I tried to tell myself I was overreacting. That street-smart, jaded New York cynicism didn't come naturally to me. I'm from Vermont, and suspicion always felt like a failure of trust. But the doubt grew, curling up inside me, silent and corrosive. After 2 weeks of tossing in bed, flinching whenever Jake touched my hand, I cracked. I still remember shaking as I Googled, "Private Investigator, New York." I felt ridiculous, as if I was someone else playing the role of the suspicious wife in a bad TV drama. But I called anyway. The man who met me in a coffee shop on the Upper West Side was unremarkable. Short, balding, wearing a battered Mets cap that said, "I belong to the city." His name was Mark, and he spoke in a slow drawl that reassured me and unnerved me all at once. I told him my suspicions, paid him in cash I pulled from 3 different ATMs. In the days that followed, I swung between nerves and guilt. I felt like a traitor, and yet every time Jake smiled at me, the old easy smile I'd loved since grad school, I wondered who he'd smiled at before. I grew short with Tyler, stopped calling my mother, drank too much cheap Cabernet during long, anxious evenings. Mark called me after 10 days. He had photos, grainy, but clear enough. Jake had spent 3 evenings in a row at a small trattoria in Soho, always with the same woman. Long dark hair, tall, the kind of woman you notice. One night they left arm in arm, looking so familiar together it physically hurt to look at the picture Mark slid across the cafe table. They never kissed, at least not on camera, but something about their bodies spoke of old secrets. I thought I'd cry. I thought I'd scream, throw things, call Jake at his desk, and confront him with every detail. Instead, I felt a strange, biting relief. It was real. I wasn't crazy. All the little humiliations, the doubts, there was an answer now. But what then? If I left him, what about Tyler? The apartment, our shared friends, my half-life as a woman who could only re-enter the workforce in flashes? The world, it seemed, did not pause just because my heart was breaking. So I adapted. I stopped trying to save our marriage, or even to understand it. I started saving myself. I contacted old friends, went out after work, joined a bar class in Park Slope. It was there I met Alex, an instructor with an easy smile and an edge that made me feel seen, maybe for the first time in years. It started harmlessly, a drink after class, then a drink every week, then late texts that turned into nights together in his walk-up. The window cracked open to the city's noise and pulse. I told myself I deserved this. I'd already lost my husband, after all. I wanted to feel electric again, if only for a little while. The double life was intoxicating and terrifying. I became hyper-aware, carefully deleting messages, rehearsing alibis, watching Jake with a sharper, more detached eye. Sometimes, I caught him staring at me, suspicion flickering across his face for just a second before he looked away. We were both ghosting each other inside our own home, bodies sharing a space, hearts in parallel universes. But what I didn't know, and what would become the cruelest twist, was that Jake's affair was mostly smoke. Oh, the dinners were real. So was the woman, Lydia. But she was his business partner, not his lover. They were jockeying for a new round of VC funding, trying to save Jake's shaky startup. She leaned on him, always too close for comfort, using her beauty like a weapon in meetings. Because investors, still, were mostly men. But Mark's photos, which I had accepted as gospel truth, had shown a closeness that, while real, stopped short of the final betrayal. Jake, it turned out, was guilty of secrets, but not quite the ones I'd believed. Meanwhile, Mark, the PI, whom I foolishly trusted, kept tabs on me too, probably sniffing profit. When I left Alex's apartment late one cold night, I saw a parked car I didn't recognize, but New York is full of watchers, and I shrugged it off. A week later, an email appeared in my inbox, a new set of photos. Me and Alex in the bar's reflection, me kissing his forehead by his brownstone gate. The email was unsigned, but I knew it was Mark. He was selling my secrets too. All that time, running, hiding, trying to dig up Jake's lies, and I'd become just as guilty. More so, maybe, because mine had crossed that line. The hypocrisy stung. In that moment, I hated Jake, hated the city, hated myself most of all. I decided to bring it all into the light. Not for forgiveness, maybe just for closure. I made a pot of coffee, waited for Jake to come home, and told him everything. About Mark, about Alex, about how I'd believed his late nights were romance and not survival. He listened, silent. Then he told me about Lydia, the failing business, the pressures I'd never bothered to ask about, his own loneliness, his fear that I was already gone. We didn't shout, we didn't cry, we just sat there. Old partners in the ruins of something we'd both neglected. The decision we made shocked us both. We wouldn't blow up our family, not right away. We'd live together, but on new terms. Co-parents, housemates, two people who understood that marriage is sometimes less about fidelity and more about forgiveness. We split our lives like New Yorkers split rooms in a rent-controlled apartment. Carefully, quietly. Tyler stayed at the center. We stopped lying except to friends, who kept commenting on how well we seemed to handle the busy city life. Jake saw Lydia now only in meetings. I met Alex occasionally, knowing he couldn't and shouldn't be the solution I was looking for. The strangest part was realizing how ordinary it all became. The pain dulled, replaced by a weary acceptance. We learned to operate as companions, joined by history and responsibility more than passion. I realized that the danger isn't in the grand betrayals. It's in the silence, the secrets that grow like mold in a Brooklyn closet. New York didn't save us. Maybe it didn't need to. It just gave us a million ways to disappear and hide. And finally, when the time was right, to surface again in the hard, clear light of our own choices. In the end, I didn't feel triumphant, but I felt honest. Maybe in a city like this, that's the best you can do. And if I ever catch that scent again on a caller, not just Jake's, anyone's, I know now not to ignore it. Not because I fear betrayal, but because I fear the slow, quiet fading that lets love slip quietly out the back door while you're too busy searching for proof.